given the scripture this morning, you can now say with confidence that you grew up with a story that Jesus grew up with. In fact, you grew up with a lot of stories Jesus grew up with, and one of them is the golden calf. This was a story he heard about when he was young. This was a story that he grew up with, and it's a story that we grew up with. And it must have resonated with Jesus in a special way as he was straining to help people see God in a new, authentic way. I'm sure Jesus resonated with Moses and the challenges Moses had. And we've been reading those challenges for weeks now, if you've come. And read the scripture if you're not able to be here. I mean, the story of Moses in the wilderness with the people of God is wonderful. So Jesus had to resonate with this story and had to let it deep into his soul. Because when you think about it, as Jesus is aware of who he is in his ministry, and he's walking to Jerusalem, everyone, if you read Scripture, go read it from this perspective, everyone tries to talk him into doing something that he's not called to do. Let's do this. Let's do that. You could be a healer. They're always trying to divert him for good, pious reasons. And he says, no, this is where I'm called. I'm not called to stay in Galilee and heal people. I'm not da-da-da. I am called to go to Jerusalem and offer myself with courage. And in that, he calls us to offer ourselves with courage. To do that, we risk losing ourselves. That's how it works. We go through the Paschal mystery. We go through the death into life. We go from Good Friday into Easter Sunday. And Jesus shows us that way. So I wonder what he would have said about the golden calf. The people who put our lectionary together think this parable relates to the golden calf. So I'm going to assume that's true. And let's go from there. Let's start with the people of Israel in the wilderness with huge anxiety. They hardly have food to eat. They don't know where they're going. There is no map. Moses disappears for a long time. What are we doing? So who in this story becomes most anxious about that? Aaron. Aaron is the most anxious. He's right next to Moses, co-leading with Moses, and he goes completely in the opposite direction. Moses is trying to open the people up to a regular, constant relationship with God that guides them every single day. Radical contingency on God, to admitting that and experiencing that and living with that. As soon as Moses wanders off to be with God for a few days, maybe, let's imagine it's a few days, Aaron's freaking out because everyone else is freaking out. They want certainty. They want to know what they need to do. So Aaron, it's just perfect. Take what's most valuable to you, give it to me, and we'll control it. We'll make a statue, and we'll carry it around, and God will be exactly where we put God. This was an ancient approach. In fact, many of us have it today. The technical definition of this is magic. Magic is when the person controls the spirit. And magic is everywhere. And believe you me, I've prayed for the gift of magic, and I don't have it. I would love to control the spirit. We have stories of ancient folks who had the God figure, and they would say, if you don't bring rain, we're going to close the door. And they would. Until it rains, you're in there alone. You're taking a time out, God. I mean, this was the approach at that time. And we still have it today. So this is what Moses is pushing up against. A huge transformation in relationship with God. An open, inclusive relationship with God where God guides us every day and we admit to our radical contingency with God. Aaron gets anxious and he goes the other way. He builds the golden calf They all know where God is, and they're back in control. In a way, they begin to worship their wealth. They worship their wealth. And they think that their wealth can insulate them from the radical disruption that life with God brings. We know the end of the story for Moses and Aaron and the people of Israel, but it's hard to live it ourselves, isn't it? It's one thing to, those people back then, they didn't get it. Ho, ho, ho. Meanwhile, I prefer magic. I want to control God also. I mean, honestly, a lot of my prayers start with, okay, Lord, I know you're busy. Got a lot of things going on. I could probably handle this. And then, of course, I can't. So I try to domesticate the Lion of Judah and put him in our suburban zoos as much as you do and as much as Aaron tried. But part of the message today is that doesn't work. That doesn't work. And so Jesus riffs on this, right? That's what parables are. Parables are a story to break open reality. Parables are a story that intentionally put cracks in your edifice. Parable is trying to smash your golden calf. Maybe partly why he got killed, right? I mean, you don't break people's reality without getting a strong reaction against it. Because we need to protect our realities. We'll feel crazy if we don't. So parables break open our reality. They crack it open so our hearts can grow and deepen. And this is what Jesus taught a lot. He taught in parables to do that for us. He's like Moses. Moses had them live a parable. They journeyed in a parable. Their life was parabolic. Jesus was bringing parables as a teaching tool to break people open. So what is parabolic in your life today? What doesn't correspond with your idea of comfort, clarity, value? What is that's breaking you open? What is that aspect that you're avoiding? And if you can forget about it for 2 days, Moses is off, thank God, let's build the calf, quick, he's out of here. What is holding you from that radical courage and contingency on God? That's what Jesus is trying to find in your soul through this parable. What is it? So he tells a story to break you open. And it's especially challenging here where we claim that one of our core values is inclusiveness. And I don't know about you, but I would like inclusiveness not to cost anything. But Jesus is telling us that inclusiveness is costly. Inclusiveness is costly. If we're really going to be open in a radical way that's different from the sidewalk and include people, then we have to let go of some of our long-held opinions, some of our long-held practices, some of our long-held certainties. Full inclusion in this world today means that we have to break our hearts open, expand our invitation to come in, and accept some limits as we do that, right? We can't be inclusive without norms. And this is what Jesus is saying. You have to know the culture of the time. When you were invited into a wedding banquet, you were given the robe to put on. That's how they partied. As Mark would say, that's how they rolled, right? You were given that robe, you came in, you put on the clothes, and you joined. And that's why when the king says, how come you're not dressed? How come you're not in with us? Why are you standing aside from us? The person's speechless. He got caught. He didn't know what to say. He knew the rules. He knew the norms. Jesus is telling us there are new norms in the life of the Spirit. And it begins with that Paschal mystery, the courage to be less so others can be more. The root of ministry, minus, to become less. In this country, becoming awake with God often means I need to find my own voice, and I don't want anyone to block it. But part of what Jesus is teaching us is to listen to other voices. I remember when I first entered a disciplined process to do this. I did it with my vestry in a parish like 3 years ago. It was called Listening Hearts, and we're bringing it here actually because it really helps. And as we started to work on this, our teacher said, if you're really listening to others, there's an easy way to know. After someone stops talking, there'll be some silence. Because you'll listen to what they say, and then when in the silence afterwards, you'll think about what they say. If you talk immediately after someone else, you're not listening to them while they're talking, you're thinking about what you're going to say. And so there's this clear, easy discipline that's really hard to listen. It requires some silence and some time to aggregate the thinking and some time for people to be able to speak. There's another simple rule. You only speak once until everyone else has had a chance. Then you speak twice. So you let others speak. Now, as we began to practice this as a community, I found that I hated it. I hated that. And I realized, this is confession, right? I realized that part of the reason I hated it was I couldn't show everyone how smart I am. I wanted to jump in there to make a point and get credit for it. And I realized if I shut up, everyone else was smarter than I was, and they said everything I would have said. There was rarely a time I could improve on the silence. And that's Dietrich Bonhoeffer's rule. If you speak, you must improve on the silence. And if you can't do that, don't say it. I realized from this disciplined approach, building a new norm, a kingdom norm around Jesus, that I was speaking for the wrong reason. And I was doing it as a priest, as someone who was in a Christian community. And I was seeking God. And so Jesus comes into our life again today to break us open, to give us hearts that will crack and burst with love for others, to give us courage and call us to courage so that we don't always have to raise our hand first to show we're the smartest, to listen to others, to create a context for others to thrive. This is a radical shift in God's kingdom, and it's one that Christians have been working on for 2,000 years. Our Jewish cousins have been working on it for 4,000 years, and we're still working on it. That's why we come back again and again to hear these parables and this nourishing scripture so that we have the courage to become less so other people can become more.